Today is the Sermon on the Mount. It's a little bit different, That's one of those gospel passages that you may not have ever heard before. I mean, even in our culture, we still make references to Sermon on the Mount and blessed are the. I mean, we hear it. It's part of just common culture. It is a text that we hear, and we've heard it in some different places before. One of the places that I've most enjoyed hearing this text is actually at a funeral. To be reminded of the power of life even in the midst of death and what we're called to do. Whoa, wait a minute. That's not what we normally are excited about and do and how we act. What our ears and hearts and minds expect. And yet here we are in the middle of this Gospel of Matthew. This begins for us, the lectionary cycle kind of sets it up that we'll read through Matthew 5 and then we continue on to journey through that over this year. But the Sermon on the Mount. It's a little different. There are other places where this is found. I mean, there's some Mark and some Luke texts that are sort of in this presence, in this gospel passage. But it's somewhere, it's the Sermon on the Level or the Sermon on the Plain in some places. This one is on the Mount. Part of this is this rich connection between the Gospel of Matthew and the Old Testament story. Part of what Matthew is doing is bridging those two sections of the Bible together. Jesus is foretelling the story of creation. Jesus is foretelling the experience of God. And then the New Testament comes. That Jesus is not some new God, but is a continuation of the revelation of who God is in the world. It's very different. It's kind of this connection, this bridge that happens between the two. There are commentators who say that there are 5 basic sections in Matthew, and part of what the editor of Matthew is saying is that those 5 sections are akin to the Torah, the 5 first books of the Old Testament. It's showing that connection again, this further revelation of what God is and the prophetic word of God in the world. Today's section is the first of the 5 sections, with chapter 5 through verses chapter 7, 28. There's this section, this Sermon on the Mount. For Matthew, Jesus lives and teaches like Moses. It's kind of this continued revelation, this fullness of Moses in the world. And Jesus goes up onto the mountain to teach, as Moses went up onto the mountain to hear the 10 Commandments. Part of what's happening here, though, we hear this, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger, blessed are those who are merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, the persecution, that if your rivaled you and persecute you, there's a promise of great reward, though, in that blessed are the poor in spirit. These, though, aren't guidelines. Have you ever, there's like this false sense of humility or this false sense of being just meek, and you know that the person doesn't really mean that. That's not what it is. This is not like, oh, well, you should be meek in life. You should be mournful in life. No, that's not what this is saying. It's saying that those who are genuinely meek and those who genuinely mourn and those who are hunger, those who express, it's not that it's this attribute that we seek after. It's this genuineness that swells up in us and in our living. There are people that you meet that are just peaceful people. And it's not like that's some aspiration of what it goes on. It's just that that's the way they are. That's their disposition. Maybe it's easier if we do the complete opposite and just imagine somebody who's angry all the time. Those people, that's just who they are. And these are the people that have gotten after the right things, that they've turned their heart and their minds and their lives and allowed the Spirit to grow up in them to transform the way they see the world. I don't know. those who are genuine in the way that they see the world. This week we saw the brutal video from Tyree's death in Memphis. And the abuse that was taking place there, we see it in the trouble challenge. It's a little different than what we've seen sometimes and before, that has seen kind of a race aspect of it. In my mind, it's been a power aspect of it. And I thought how distilling that is, that the powerful versus those who are vulnerable reigns in our culture all across it. Oh, we've got some misguided principles. Price of drugs in the United States versus the price of the same drug all across the world. 100 and 200 and 400 times higher here. What's up with that? Oh, these places of power that they make the decisions and the rest of us just have to live with it. Something is askew, especially in a nation that claims such a rich Christian morality has shaped us. We've missed it. But that's where my mind has been. This what we've seen this past week and over a period is an image of the power of some pushed on to the more vulnerable all across. I think that's what it is. And part of what I saw and hearing this text, that's kind of how it works in a preacher's mind. I think we just move from sermon to sermon in our mind. What are we looking for? What do we see? And when Tyree's mother was on TV begging people to peacefully protest and not cause destruction, I thought, blessed are the peacemakers. This poor grieving mother is asking people not to be destructive to the city. That's her place is. I'm like, how could you not be full of anger and sadness and yet at the same time asking people to be peacemakers? Oh, there's always a lot going on in any situation, but that's where my mind went. I could see that. The poor in spirit, those who mourn, those who are meek, those who are hungry, those who are merciful, those who are pure in heart, peacemakers, persecution. Blessed are. These blessings that come from Jesus, these teachings on the Sermon on the Mount, are blessings that completely reverse the values of most societies, including our own. Whoa. Those who hunger and those who are poor in spirit, those who need God's healing presence most in their lives are the very ones that are blessed by God. Sermon on the Mount, the gospel in our lives changes the way that we see, the way that we live, the way that we love, the way that we interact. It changes us. It should. That's part of the power of the gospel in our lives. That's part of the witness of the baptismal waters for the world. That's part of our countercultural message for the world. Now, some of you have heard me say this before, but nothing can get my blood boiling more quickly than the traffic on Wendover. I don't understand it. 45 speed limit. I do not need to go down through there, nor do I need to be pushed at 60, 65. Wide open. It's dangerous. The road's not big enough for the amount of traffic. It's horrible. And I don't understand why in the world I'm the only one that can figure this out in the entire city of Greensboro. And then I think, blessed are the peacemakers, you're not being one today. I've been corrupted and changed by our culture. Not being a peacemaker, not looking at things with the good heart and the good lens and the good eyes. Blessed are You know, part of gospel living is completely turning the world upside down for ourselves and the world around us. There's a spirit about it. There's a change about it. That song perhaps is fitting. Sometimes, one of the beauty of our theology is, in Methodist Church especially, that it's part of the song that's at work. These hymns. And the one that comes to mind now is, they will know that we are Christians by our love. See, y'all got it. You know it. They will know that we are Christians by our love. They will know how we interact, how we shape, how we see the world. One of the best preacher's lines I've ever heard was in college. Some people have just enough religion to make them miserable. Thou shalt not reigns in their life. And oftentimes the thou shalt nots go to the other people and not to ourselves. And yet we hear over and over and over of the work of God's Spirit in our lives to transform us. It's not that I'm just going to wake up one morning and I've decided to be a peacemaker. I've decided in my life to be meek and mild. I've decided all of a sudden that I'm going to be pure in heart. Now, I'm not saying that there are not elements of our life and the way that we live and the choosing to be able to chase after those elements of Christian living. I do think that it's a heart and a head and a mind and a soul interaction through God's Spirit working within us to bring about transformation of us and the world around us. Hearing these again remind us of the transformation of the Spirit of God that brings to our lives and to our society. Blessed are those who are genuine. Pope Francis this day, I have decided that Twitter's not all bad yet. I can follow the things that I love. I was just telling Lynette about Larry the cat. That's the mouser at number 10 Downing Street that I follow. I follow Ukrainian soldiers that are reporting from the front lines all around. They tell you good morning, good night, that we're still fighting. And, I like that kind of stuff. Pope Francis even tweets. That, I think, is interesting. Somebody does it with some great words. But from his sermon today, the poor in spirit are those who know they cannot rely on themselves, that they are not self-sufficient, that they feel their need for God and recognize every good gift that comes from God as a gift, as a grace. I've thought of that all week. I didn't say it nearly as eloquently. That it's the grace that is given to us through God's Spirit that restores our souls, that enables us to live life unafraid, to know that God goes with us, and to help us be able to see with different ways how to treat one another. And the reminder is that we can't do it on our own. I love that about this text. It's not about what we do. It's about that wherever we find ourselves, going through whatever situation we see ourselves in, that it's the very Spirit of God that enables us to be blessed people. Doesn't mean we're going to be perfect. Doesn't mean we're going to get everything right. Doesn't mean we're just going to be, just boring old Christian people that don't do anything wrong. It does mean that the Spirit of God resides within us to enable the very best that God envisions for us to be served in the world, to go forth into the world unafraid. That's what it means to me. It's not a reliance upon ourselves and our abilities, but it's a dependence upon God and God's ability. And that, my friends, transforms the world around us, to allow the goodness of God to reign in God's world. All glory, honor, and power be to the one who was and who is to come. Amen.